Earlier, I spoke about the Senate trial with a member of the president's defense team, Alan Dershowitz, professor emeritus at Harvard Law School and author of the new book, Guilt by Accusation. Mr. Dershowitz, let's start with the Senate's decision by a vote of 51 to 49 not to call witnesses. The Republicans had the vote, so they won. But is there a legal justification, a legal reason for not calling evidence when there is substantial new evidence?
Yes. As I argued to the Senate, if somebody were accused of the crime of abuse of power or dishonesty, something that's not a crime, what you do is you make a motion to dismiss. And the other side says, no, we want to introduce evidence. No. You can't introduce evidence if there's no legitimate indictment. Here, the articles of impeachment did not charge an impeachable offense. So the right answer is to dismiss it and cut it off right there. Okay. No amount of witnesses could have changed that conclusion.
Okay, but the top Democrats in Congress, Nancy Pelosi in the House, Chuck Schumer in the Senate, say that the failure to call witnesses is going to put a taint on any acquittal. Listen to him.
Sure.
This country is headed towards the greatest cover-up since Watergate.
Well, he will not be acquitted. You cannot be acquitted if you don't have a trial.
Of course you can be acquitted if you don't have a trial, if they don't charge you with a legitimate crime. It's the fault of Nancy Pelosi and the others for failing to charge an impeachable offense.
But they're going to say, they say he's never going to be truly acquitted because you didn't have witnesses, you didn't have new evidence, you dismissed it before you even really got to hear what the facts were.
Well, if in a criminal context, that would be called a victory, a great victory. Here, if they haven't charged an offense, then maybe he hasn't been acquitted, but he also hasn't been charged. He's in exactly the same situation he should have been in had they done the right thing and not impeached him at all.
You created quite a controversy with something you said in the Senate trial. Here is what you said, and here's some of the blowback.
If a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment.
If you can identify something as president that's in your political interest and say that's the national interest, then all bets are off.
Here's what I don't understand.
Right.
You have made it clear, and you and I went at it last week on the question of, you say that to be an impeachable offense, it's got to be a crime.
Criminal-like behavior akin to treason and bribery. That's what the Constitution means when it says treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors.
So then why get into this question of whether or not the president thinks his re-election is in the public interest? Because you seem to be implying that somehow that gives him an extra level of immunity.
No, it doesn't. I was asked the question by a senator. The question was, does quid pro quo matter? And my answer is, it matters if what the president did is illegal or wrong. But if the president did something completely lawful, the fact that part of his motivation may have been to help his election cannot be the quid pro quo. That's what I said. I never said, I don't mean, and I don't believe that a president can do anything if he thinks in his national interest. Look, I supported the impeachment of Richard Nixon. He thought that the 5 crimes he committed were all in the national interest. These folks have totally distorted, quite deliberately, because they saw that I was having an impact on some of the senators. So they deliberately distorted what I said and said, oh, even if it's criminal, if the president thinks it's in the best interest, it can't be an impeachable offense. Nonsense. I never said it. The Wall Street Journal says I never said it. The New York Times says I never said it. And the fact that Schumer and Schiff and CNN say I said it doesn't make it true.
But again, I don't even know why intent is an issue and why you got into it.
Because I was asked.
No, but my point is, the activity is what you say is the key. If it's criminal or criminal-like activity, then it can be impeachable. If it's not criminal activity, it doesn't matter what the motive is.
Well, the example I gave, I said there are 3 levels of motive. The example I gave is a president says, I'm not giving you your money, Ukraine, unless you give me $1 million kickback. Of course that's criminal.
Right.
And of course he goes to jail. Abraham Lincoln sent the troops home to Indiana to vote for Republicans in the election. Was that impeachable? No, because
But it wouldn't matter what his motive was.
Well, it doesn't matter to me, but it matters to Schiff and it matters to the people on the other side. They were focusing on motive. I was responding to them. I didn't put that in my original speech because you're right. It's not relevant to my argument. But I was on the floor to respond to constitutional arguments. I was asked that question, and then it was deliberately wrenched out of context.
You seem pretty upset about it.
I was very upset about that because it has hurt me. People think I actually believe a president like Nixon can do anything he wants. It's exactly the opposite of what I've been teaching, arguing, and as a civil libertarian believing in for 50 years. How dare they deliberately and willfully distort my position and then not give me an opportunity to respond?
All right, forget impeachment for a moment.
Right.
I'm asking you this, and maybe you'll agree to do it or not, but a thought experiment.
Sure.
Alan Dershowitz, citizen. Do you find it troubling, problematic that a president would link in any way, forget his motive, and I'm not saying it's criminal, his support for an ally and even military aid for an ally to investigating his political opponent?
And on Election Day, as a citizen, I will allow that to enter into my decision who to vote for. But it's not an impeachable offense. And I was there to argue a constitutional issue, not to tell people who to vote for president. I'm a liberal Democrat.
So, are you going to tell me whether or not you find it troubling?
Of course, any citizen would find that troubling if it were proved. Yes, that would be troubling. Troubling is not the criteria for impeachment.
I am not asking you about impeachment.
According to Schiff, unless you do the right thing, you're impeachable. And doing something troubling is impeachable. That's not what the framers said.
So you do think that linking aid to an ally for your investigating your political opponents.
If a president linked aid to an ally to personal benefit that was not in the public interest, that would be wrong. That would be a reason for me not to vote for him.
And when you say in the public interest, does the fact that it might help his reelection, does that make it?
No, that wouldn't qualify as the public interest. The fact that it would help eliminate corruption in the Ukraine, a country which I have been to. I represented the former president of Ukraine. I know a lot about corruption in the Ukraine. The fact that...
But you seem to be saying right here, Professor, that what Donald Trump did was wrong and troubling, but it wasn't impeachable.
No, what you said is if a president did it solely for his own interest, would it be?
I never used the word solely.
Okay, but I'm using it. If a president...
Well, what difference does it make if he did it partially?
Oh, every president has an eye on electability.
But we're not talking about electability. We're talking about investigating your political rivals.
But if a president does it for mixed motives, he says 90% of my motive is I want to get rid of corruption. Let's assume a guy named Joe Biden goes and says to somebody in the Ukraine, unless you fire the investigator, I'm going to cut off the money. And let's assume 98% of what he had in his mind was the public interest. But in the back of his mind, he says, you know, maybe it'll help my kid. He works for the company. That would not be impeachable. That would not be corruption. When you have mixed motives, you can't turn innocent conduct into criminal conduct. That was my point.
Okay. Finally, I want to ask you about you, aside from this case,
sure,
your role and your sense of yourself as a defense lawyer. Over the years, you have represented some pretty controversial figures, I think.
To say the least.
To say the least. O.J. Simpson, Mike Tyson, Jeffrey Epstein. I understand the principle of everyone has a right to a counsel, to defense.
Right.
But why would you spend your time, why would you spend your talents defending such unsavory characters?
Because the Constitution requires that the most despised people, the most controversial people, must get a defense. I litigated cases in the Soviet Union and in other places where people who were despised by the public and by the government couldn't get a lawyer, and I decided, after being in the Soviet Union, I would never allow public opinion to impact my decision. I would have been there...
How about your personal opinion? Aren't there some people that you'd say, you know, they have a right to a defense? I just don't want to be part of it.
No, because I was a professor for 50 years and I have no excuse for not taking cases, I want to be part of cases where nobody else is willing to come in and do the case. I want to be part of controversial cases. This case, I didn't do it for that reason. This case,
I'm not talking about this
because the Constitution was being absolutely compromised in its provisions.
And in these other cases, if you end up, because of your talents, you end up getting them off, I
hope so. I mean, I never want to take a case where I don't win. I've won a lot of cases because the law or the facts were on my side. Often the facts are against me, but the law's on my side. Look, To me, my hero was John Adams, standing up for the people, the murderers in the Boston Massacre, and accepting all the opprobrium that was heaped upon him, because he said, I want to show the King of England that we in America believe that everybody is entitled to a defense. He defended them, and it almost destroyed his career and his personal life. He did the right thing, and I'm going to continue to do that for as long as God gives me the strength to defend people who are guilty, innocent, popular, or unpopular.
Professor Dershowitz, you show no sign of slowing down. Thank you. Always good to talk with you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.